Hi. Um my name is Anurag, founder of Avail, previously founder of Polygon, also chief evangelist at RootPe. Today I am repping RootPe. Primarily, RootPe is company that is focuses on using various technologies from the broader cryptography field and then applying it to more real world problems. So we work across a spectrum of fintech and privacy related problems. Today, I'm just kind of going to focus on what RootPay Labs has been working on, something called Personal Data Vault. This is primarily a privacy preserving open data platform. And I think I'll just be waiting for the presentation to be put on. But the idea came to us like when we were going through Rahul's speech as well. In general, the idea is that a lot of developers kind of struggle when building these privacy preserving apps or data sharing apps. There's a lot of confusion around how to handle consent, granular consent, just in time consent. How do you kind of prevent data leaks? One of the motivations that we started building this platform was we had this company, portfolio company in India called Fold Money, which does works over the account aggregation data sharing framework, which takes in a lot of data from consumers and stores it in their own data stores. And so their question to us was, what can we do to prevent data leaks to this data store? Like, how can we prevent this data? I mean, it's just developer. How do we reduce developer risk? In the sense that because the data leaks can lead to a lot of reputational, lot of legal risks, and so we thought about how should we kind of approach this problem, and that's how really we came about with the idea of the personal data vault. This has been something we've been kind of working alongside Silence Labs, with Silence Labs Silent Compute product. But the general idea is that we introduced this platform. So you can think of this as this data sharing platform, which has privacy preserving techniques at the root, and it allows for this more granular, like consent based data sharing. So if some of you are aware of what the account aggregator does, the account aggregator does this more open data sharing platform for financial data. This we kind of envision this to be much more broader, in the sense that the real unlock was that once we can kind of understand that today a user's digital footprint is like spread across the web, in the sense that there are some fragments of data in every different digital property. So you'll have some data in digital banking websites, some data in e-commerce websites, some in restaurant websites, food delivery websites, and it's a lot of digital footprints that users leave across the internet, and all of it is very siloed. It's all that this data is logged in proprietary platforms, and in general has its own legal binding between the user and the proprietary platform. So like Google Maps will have access to your location data. Amazon will have access to your purchase data, for example. Airline sites will have access to your flight data, for example. Banks will have access to your banking data, but all of this is siloed. And typically what developers do is take this data from different places and then stitch them together to create like better experiences, for example. But what gets lost is it is up to the application developer to implement the end to end stack for like handling all of this data. And so that is really where we came in the sense of how can we kind of create this platform where we create the base foundation for this like data storing and sharing, and then apps developers, third party app developers can come in, access these SDKs, and then build their business logic on top. And so I will go ahead in detail into the presentation upon how this is implemented, what all is like has gone into this. Years of privacy tech have like thinking have influenced the design of this platform. But in general, let me kind of step through the solution a bit. So in general, like this is RootPe. I'll focus on the RootPe labs part, which is the PDB part or the personal data vault. And it essentially, like the insight was, are there technologies available here where we can kind of take in user data, encrypt it, and ensure that we are able to give businesses insights, like ability to query the encrypted data without actually sharing the raw data. I mean, because that solves a lot of fundamental problems with, like which has plagued privacy preserving tech. And essentially, so that's really the heart of the thing is this: can we kind of like control the access and sharing via this platform? And so, what is it really? I mean, you can think of the personal data vault, like each user having this own personal data wallet of sorts, which will have all these, like transaction records, which might have financial data, digital platform data, document storage, so on and so forth. And there have been various attempts before this, but we'll get into later. But in general, like it can be used for this variety of use cases across, like risk assessment, consumer insight, ad targeting, cross selling, automation, but a bunch of use cases which we don't kind of get into detail here. I mean, this is some representation of some use cases that could be built on top of this platform, but of course, there are much more. So you could do tailored health advisory, you could do cross selling, wealth advisory, smart transportation systems, and so on. I mean, much more. I'm just trying to give you some idea. This is some data points on like how much data have we started accumulating on digital properties already. I mean, it's only increasing day by day, and the amount of data that is sitting on all these platforms and siloed on these platforms is increasing day by day. The time spent by humans in general on the internet, on digital properties, on apps is also increasing, and that's why the data accumulation is also increasing day by day. Uh, and these are again some stats on the real cost in general, how much cookie tracking is happening, and so on and so forth. So, right, like, so I'll not spend too much time here. I'll just get into quickly into the solution. But this is like some um, properties that we identified hold the majority of the useful data that can be brought together by the personal data platform. So if you kind of look at some of these categories, these once we kind of aggregate all this data into the personal data wallet, like you kind of have a very good picture of what the user, like purchase behavior, different patterns, for example, shopping pattern, like even likes and comments, right? Like behavioral pattern, for example. And so you can do an actual, you can go through these categories. In the sense, there is a lot of things that you can do with this, like especially in terms of personalization, recommendation, and so on. So hopefully I've given you some kind of idea about like the use, the goals. For example, I'll spend a bit on like what, how does it actually work, right? Like how have we envisioned it? The base technology works on secure MPC implementation. So essentially, you have the data that is sourced from users, and so of course there are different ways to for users to opt into the system. But essentially, like we've seen, we've studied different ways of getting users to use the system. The most successful that we've seen from previous examples is when businesses actually give utility to the user rather than like asking for users to share their data. So to give you a concrete example, like when you actually install Google Maps for the first time, Google Maps asks you for consent to like share your location, and like we actually give it, and you are actually sharing your real time location per second, millisecond sort of location with Google every single second of your life, in exchange for the utility that it will provide you directions from point A to point B, or and so on and so forth. And so that is a very real example of users valuing utility above privacy concerns in general. Of course, we expect Google to kind of maintain privacy preserving infrastructure, that the data will not leak, and so on. And but as we have gone and seen in previous presentations, You never know when this location is shared with other providers, etc., etc. But I'm like belaboring the point. What I'm trying to say is that when you want to appeal to the user for customer or data acquisition, you need to appeal to utility rather than abstract concepts like data ownership or things like that, right? Like, I mean, essentially you have to value utility. And so the idea is that personal data world doesn't really have a front end of its own. It's just a platform and an SDK, and the front end is always businesses or third party app developers, and they provide the utility in turn for which users kind of provide data into the system in general. But having said that, once the data enters the systems via different tools, like if the platform, if the digital property has an API, we use the API. If it's available through a web interface, we have a Chrome extension. If it's available only via mobile apps, like we kind of do more sophisticated techniques in general. But everything is based on consent of the user. In general, once the data enters the system, it sits in this a vault based on secure MPC. The data is encrypted, sharded, put in various places in general, and then you have this verifiable consent layer. So you can actually implement granular consent. So you can do actually queries like, is the user above 18 or not? Has the user transacted on Amazon in the last 6 months or not? Like, has the bank balance of this user been about $5,000 for the last 6 months or not? Yes and no, sort of things. So you can do verifiable consent for these queries, not only for the actual raw data. uh, the the basic benefit, like the backend for this, is powered by this um, like, so in essentially this is like kind of the end-to-end workflow. So the user logs in, authenticates, pull data from platform, works on the content, pre-processes and stores it in the PV. That is the architecture, so as to speak, the secure MPC protocol in general. We have the compiler that like whenever a query comes into this vault, it breaks it into these smaller functions in general, and outputs the relevant opcodes. All of that is of course abstracted away from the user as well as the third party developer, but like just for the context of this audience in general, that is how the querying works. And so we've been working very closely with Silence to kind of implement this compiler, which can help us to do more expressive queries. So today that compiler is able to support most analytical statistical queries like mean, median, average, most mathematical functions. In general, in the future we should be able to do more, but even with this capability we are able to kind of do a lot of querying, aggregate querying from the data. um, the compiler essentially like it's being written in like in a couple of forms. So you can actually write general Python programs, and the compiler then translates it to lower level opcodes. And so essentially for the front end, it should, like for the front end third party developer, it should be only a bunch of Python programming that needs to be done. This is actually something that Silence has been working with us in general, and this is like this verifiable granular consent that I think Rahul also spoke about. And this is something like we are very kind of bullish about in general. How can we bind consent with the compute in general? Like, so there's a lot of auditability, traceability that we can bring to this table. The broader idea is that instead of each developer building this end-to-end stack, we build this stack, we build the platform, we ensure that there is traceability, auditability, consent verification, and so on. And in general, all that work is left to the platform, and the app developer doesn't need to get into the weeds of that. And this is the the secure MPC engine that kind of powers it all in general. So we kind of looked at various different techniques of how to go about this. We settled on secure MPC because we thought this was the most feasible, and given the trade-offs that we could take in general. And this has helped us to kind of take the platform, go to market, take it to market faster. Test with developers sooner, rather than wait for like a very perfect solution. There is a demo which I will not get into. We are already kind of piloting this with a few customers in general. But the demo, we are happy to share the demo online along with this deck in general. And but in general, we are able to already do analytical queries on top of the encrypted data. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap this up in general, so the personal data vault is this open data platform which is privacy preserving, uses secure MPC as the backend, and has this powerful verifiable consent use case in general. And should we the core thesis is that we should be able to kind of encrypt this data and still be able to do querying over this data set, so that like we kind of avoid a lot of the privacy based issues that we kind of move into in general. Also, I mean, there's been an attempt to actually look at compliance with existing privacy laws like GDPR, for example. And so we've kind of taken a conscious decision to kind of ensure that the platform is in compliance with as much legal regulations as possible based on privacy laws. And so essentially, like all the general principles of privacy preserving laws, we ensure that the platform kind of ensures that we adhere to these principles, like data minimization, for example, privacy by design, data subject rights, and so on. This we are opening the platform up for early access. This is the QR code to the link. If you're interested, please scan the link. We will be happy to kind of onboard you as an early developer on this. Of course, the platform is still in alpha. We are still papering over all. It's very much in development. But like we want to work with a select set of third-party app developers who want to bring their business logic in, interface with the platform with these private data sets, and see what can be done, how we can improve the developer UX, for example, and so on. So yeah, with this, I'll end this quick intro to the personal data world. Very happy to kind of answer questions on this, but also happy to have one-on-one conversation after. Thank you.
Question? Yeah, I wanted to ask that you mentioned AI there as a personal data vault. Is there realistic potential of you being able to share your data give access to different LLMs to be able to use that data as part of as training data?
So there are two parts to this. Of course, AI, like LLMs, can be a consumer of the SDK. In general, they can consume data from this, just like a regular API caller, for example. So certainly yes to one. The second interpretation is, can we run large language models on top of the encrypted data? If that is the question as well, that is at the moment, at least at this stage of the product, not possible, because we've reached a place where we are able to do a lot of statistical functions right now. We are expanding the scope of that. Hopefully we should be able to implement all the opcodes that are required for general LLM usage, but we haven't actively gotten there. But in general, in theory, it should be possible. Not today, but maybe in a few months.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Let's give it up for